Good evening and welcome at Africa World Hour. This is Channel Africa, the African perspective, broadcasting live from Johannesburg in South Africa. Catch us live on SABC Plus app, DSTV Audio Bouquet, Channel 802. In Open View, Channel 628. I'm Innocent Semosa, of course, in for my colleague. She will be, of course, back with you next week. Stories that made headlines today. Medics in Gaza say they are fighting a losing battle to save lives as mass starvation spreads under Israeli and restrictions. An orthopedic doctor at southern Gaza's Nazir Hospital told the BBC that many patients there are malnourished. Another doctor at the hospital says there's been no food for 3 days and children are dying in the wards. The BBC's Rashid Abdu Alouf has been speaking with the doctor's family in Gaza.
I spoke to my youngest brother. They said that they had only a small portion of lentil soup for the last 48 hours with his kids. He sent me a photo for his youngest son, and I couldn't recognize him when I saw him. I mean, seeing his picture today, you can show how people are starving in Gaza. Our colleagues who work, also the freelancers who work with us in Gaza, are also suffering from the same condition that everyone in Gaza is suffering. The starvation is real this time.
Now, the Kremlin says a Russian delegation is on its way to Istanbul to negotiate with Russia. The talks have been planned for several weeks, but until now, Russia had not confirmed whether it would take part. The BBC's Vitaly Shevchenko has the details.
It's the same delegations, really, the same demands. Ukraine is looking for a ceasefire and a meeting between Volodymyr Zelensky and Vladimir Putin. Russia is saying it's too early for any of that. Instead, they want to talk about the memorandum that Russia presented to Ukraine during the previous round of talks. And that memorandum is essentially a demand for surrender, which Ukraine is not going to accept at this stage.
And back at home, Angola's efforts to stabilize declining crude oil production got a boost today with the launch of 2 new offshore projects, according to the National Oil and Gas Agency, ANPG. The developments have added 60,000 barrels per day to the country's output. Buntle Hedbush has more.
Sub-Saharan Africa's second largest oil producer after Nigeria, Angola has overhauled its oil and gas regulations to attract energy companies and stabilize oil production. Oil production in the country has halved because of maturing fields since reaching a peak of 2 million barrels per day in 2008. The 2 new projects announced by Total Energies, which include production from the Begonia and Clove Phase 3 offshore projects, will deliver additional production capacity and help the country maintain its production levels above 1 million barrels a day.
And to SADC now, Zambia has signed a $1.1 billion deal to build a crude oil refinery and energy complex in Ntola. The project is expected to create thousands of jobs, boost energy security and stabilize fuel prices. The Industry Development Corporation says the 60,000 barrel per day facility will meet national demands and allow for exports. Industrial Development Corporation CEO Conwell Mulea explains.
We estimate that we are going to create 3,000 jobs in the construction phase of the project, which is a period of 1 year. With phase 1. Eventually, the project will settle around 600 to 700 jobs because of the high efficiency that we have on the technology that we are deploying on the refinery. Over and above that, the complex will contain a power station and with 100 megawatts, set to feed the grid. So it's a broad-based industrial complex that will start the industrialization.
The International Court of Justice is preparing to deliver a landmark ruling on the responsibilities of states in addressing climate change. Pacific Island nation Vanuatu, which led the push for the case, urges that the World Court is uniquely positioned to clarify international legal obligations on the issue. The case comes amid ongoing global divisions on climate action, highlighted by the United Nations earlier withdrawal from the 2015 Paris Agreement. Kayalihle Kumalo has more.
The International Court of Justice, which is the central organ of the United Nations, authorized the International Union for Conservation Nature to participate in the advisory proceedings on the obligations of the states regarding climate change. The World Court's 15 judges will count on strands of environmental law when they deliver their findings at the Peace Palace in The Hague, Netherlands, this afternoon. Some of the questions the ICJ will seek to address include the key responsibilities of countries to protect the globe from the effects of climate change and reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases. They'll also tackle the issue of legal consequences for those states who fail to comply.
All right, follow us on social media for updates, highlights, and exclusive content. On X, we are Channel Africa at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook, Channel Africa, on Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on TikTok at Channel Africa 1, and of course on YouTube, we are at Channel Africa 1. This is Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
At the forefront, the most pressing issues on Africa World Hour with Semosa.
Channel Africa.
Legislation to review the bilateral relationship between the United Nations, or should I say the United States and South Africa, has passed through the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House of Representatives on early step in the long process of the bill actually becoming law. Authored and introduced by Republican Congressman Ronnie Jackson in April, the U.S. South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act of 2025 is viewed as part of efforts to provide President Donald Trump with the tools necessary to impose sanctions on South African politicians and officials in government, and the ANC in particular, who chose to support American adversaries like China, Russia, and Iran. Showing Bryce Peace reports on the committee's vote and how the process is likely to unfold.
The bill passed through committee 34-16, a move celebrated by Congressman Jackson on X, who said South Africa had made its choice when it abandoned America and its allies and sided with communists and terrorists. Listen to Jackson during a session of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs.
For decades, South Africa has enjoyed a rich partnership with the United States, particularly in terms of trade, counterterrorism cooperation, and global health. Recently, however, South Africa has abandoned America and our allies and increasingly aligned itself with our adversaries like China, Russia, Iran, and Iranian military proxies like Hamas. My bill, the U.S.-South Africa Bilateral Relations Review Act, will provide the President and the Secretary of State with the tools needed to conduct a full review of the U.S.-South Africa bilateral relationship and determine whether South Africa has engaged in activities that undermine United States national security or foreign policy interest. In addition, my bill will give the Trump administration the authorities needed to identify and sanction corrupt officials of the ANC and continue to align with China, Iran, Russia, and have abandoned the United States in the process.
The legislation followed President Trump's executive order in February cutting off aid to South Africa, highlighting its foreign policy positions, including its accusation of genocide against Israel at the International Court of Justice, while creating a refugee program for white Afrikaners in the main. Republican Brian Mast is chair of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs.
This is a targeted and overdue response to troubling shifts in South Africa's foreign policy under the African National Congress. Let me be clear that this bill is not anti-South Africa, it is pro-accountability. For too long, we've watched a key partner drift closer to authoritarian regimes, conducting joint military drills with Russia, strengthening economic and cybersecurity ties with the Kremlin and Beijing, and aligning with efforts to de-dollarize the global economy. These actions raise serious questions about the ANC's alignment with the democratic values and U.S. interests.
But South Africa was not without support. Several Democrats voted against the legislation, including ranking member Gregory Meeks.
South Africa acts as a leader, not only among African countries, but also on the world stage. As we have seen this year with the country's G20 presidency, we have a long history of partnership between our countries that I hope to see continue in the future, including with a successful handover as the United States assumes the G20 presidency next year. Unfortunately, this bill will not help to deepen or further that partnership. Instead, I believe it sets us down the wrong path with respect to our relationship with South Africa. South Africa has taken a number of foreign policy positions that I happen not to agree with. But in mature relations between countries, we can deal with those differences through diplomacy and dialogue. This legislation does just the opposite.
Meeks strongly opposed the legislation, calling it unnecessary, given the earlier targeting of South Africa by the White House.
President Trump has already disproportionately targeted South Africa. He's done this by trying to embarrass President Ramaphosa and the Oval Office with faulty evidence of purported atrocities in the country, by instituting an executive order cutting all U.S. assistance to the country and putting it in a place where special refugee resettlement programs for Afrikaners. And at the same time, he's blocking the resettlement of literally all other refugees to the United States. Refugees fleeing genocide in Sudan, not allowed. Refugees fleeing Russian bombardments in Ukraine, not allowed. Refugees fleeing political persecution in Venezuela, not allowed. This is glaring hypocrisy, and I do not believe Congress should further enable or double down on President Trump's misguided approach. When we disagree with our partners, including on the continent of Africa, we should handle that responsibly by using diplomacy and presenting convincing arguments.
A similar bill to review the relationship between Pretoria and Washington did pass the Republican-led House last May, during the last Congress, but was not taken up by the Democratic leadership of the Senate. With the new Congress in session since January, the leadership of both chambers is now controlled by Republicans, which means that if the legislation is passed in a full House vote, it could very well be taken up by the GOP Senate. And while the bill has now passed committee, it will require a vote by all 435 members of the House to move forward. That vote is at least weeks to months away, with Congress in recess until September. And if later passed, it would then head to the Senate for further deliberation, where its future remains uncertain. I'm Sean Rice-Pease in New York.
All right, on to this now. As world leaders prepare for a high-level UN conference on Palestine later this month, Human Rights Watch is calling for concrete, time-bound actions to end what it calls decades of impunity for Israeli abuses. The organization says this must go beyond statements about two-state solutions, urging sanctions, arms embargoes, and enforcement of international law, including support for the International Criminal Court. Now, joining us is Yasmin Ahmed, UK Director at Human Rights Watch. Yasmin, thank you so much for making the time. Welcome to Channel Africa.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. What is Human Rights Watch urging UN member states to commit to at the upcoming high-level conference on Palestine? What do you want them to commit on?
Well, what Human Rights Watch is saying is that it's absolutely critical that states at this stage, where we're seeing an unfolding acts of genocide happening before our eyes, that at this conference that's happening this month, it's critical that member states of the United Nations come together and use every piece of leverage that they have to stop Israel from continuing these atrocities. And that includes a comprehensive arms embargo, sanctions on high-level officials, withdrawal and suspension from free trade agreements. Every bit of leverage needs to be used. What we're seeing on the ground in Gaza is nothing short of significant atrocities. It is clear that Israel is carrying out the extermination of the Palestinian people, and states need to act now.
What does meaningful action look like for you? And I'm asking because you have warned that more talks of peace without action risks, enabling further atrocities.
It's very clear. Right now, at this very moment, all states should be imposing a comprehensive arms embargo on Israel. There should be no arms and military equipment or military assistance given to Israel while it continues to carry out these atrocities. Just this week, from the 19th of July to the 23rd, 43 people, including children, have died of malnutrition, starvation. We are seeing, and we have said this as Human Rights Watch since late 2023, that Israel is using starvation as a weapon of war, and it has just got worse. Where is the moral compass of this world? We need to see it now. And if the international community gets together at a time of ongoing genocidal acts and does not do and take concrete measures, they will have failed at every single measure.
Yeah, and some organizations and the HRW says that the threshold for genocide risks has been crossed. Then what obligations does that place on the UK and other states under the international law?
Yes, so according to international law, the obligation to prevent genocide, in fact, arises when there is a serious risk of genocide. And as we know, the International Court of Justice has said that there is a clear risk that the plausible rights under the Genocide Convention are being breached by Israel right now. And they have imposed a number of provisional measures that they said Israel must take, including ensuring the sufficient humanitarian provision. And Israel has consistently failed to uphold what the International Court of Justice said. So what does that mean? What does this obligation to prevent genocide mean? Well, first of all, it means stop sending arms. That's absolutely clear, that if there is a clear risk that a state is carrying out genocide, you stop selling them arms. And then you also take all other reasonable steps that you have as a state and leverage. That's trade, diplomatic, military, everything you have to try and stop that from unfolding. States cannot talk about atrocity prevention, about the responsibility to protect, and yet when we are seeing this unfolding before our very eyes, fail to act.
Yeah, we do know now that the UK has suspended trade talks and sanctioned 2 Israeli ministers. Do you welcome these steps, and what more should the UK government do? Is this a step in the right direction?
Indeed. The UK government should be applauded for doing what it's done, but what it has done is insufficient and too late. Why is it insufficient? Because what they have done is they have suspended future trade talks, which in any event were halted. They have not done what the EU did, which is to announce a review of the current trade agreement. Unfortunately, the EU has not had consensus as to what to do going forward, but the EU has reviewed and found that Israel has breached the fundamental provision on human rights in their free trade agreement. The UK government has failed to do that, and that is within its a gift to do. So that's one thing it should do immediately. And then secondly, the UK government should immediately be suspending licenses for F-35 fighter jet components. 15% of F-35 fighter jet components are manufactured in the UK. The UK government has said that there's a loophole and allowed these fighter jet components to continue to be supplied that end up in Israel being used by the Israeli forces in Gaza. That should end immediately. We also need to see a comprehensive arms embargo, not just 35 F-35s, but everything, and it should be two-way. And we need sanctions on further high-level officials. So yes, the UK government should be applauded for the steps that they have taken, also for the steps that they have taken to bring a multilateral consensus together, and that's how it needs to be done. But right now, they need to be using every leverage to the extreme to stop what we know are atrocities and famine, a man-made famine from spreading.
Yeah, but when you look at the global arms embargo that you're calling for, what are the chances of UK supporting such measures in your view?
Well, interestingly, the Thatcher government in 1982 imposed a full arms embargo on Israel. So I simply asked this government, if Margaret Thatcher, a Conservative, could do that in 1982 in relation to Israel's actions in Lebanon, that did not by any means rise to this level, why cannot this Labor government in the UK now take the same steps? There is no question it's possible. It is just whether they have political will and political backbone, and that is the question.
Yeah, you have also called for a recognition, should I say, a reinstituted UN anti-apartheid committee. What would be the purpose of that today, in your view?
Well, the purpose of that is that Human Rights Watch found a number of, maybe 2 to 3 years ago now, or maybe more now, 4 to 5 years ago, we found that what Israel is doing in the occupied territories amounts to the crime against humanity of apartheid and persecution. And what we are saying, it is absolutely critical that the UN recompose its body to oversee measures to ensure that those acts are not continued, and to be reporting back to the UN General Assembly on the measures that must be instituted to end that. As we know that it is possible to end the crime of apartheid. It happened in South Africa. What we are saying now is that UN bodies and states need to end this crime against humanity of apartheid and persecution. And they need to be using all the leverage, and the UN needs to be constituting all of the committees and all of the measures that they have to do that.
Yeah, Yasmin, finally, what outcome would you like to see from this conference? And what's the state government failed to act? What is it that you want to see happening in this conference?
What we need leaders of the world to be at this conference. We need the prime ministers, the presidents to be sitting around this table, and we need clear, time-bound commitments to take these concrete measures. We don't need any more threats, any more talk. What we need is concrete action in the form that we've been discussing, which is a clear two-way arms embargo, a suspension of trade agreement, sanctions on Israeli officials. We need them to be saying, this is what we are doing collectively as an international community. If they fail to do that, they will have failed not just the Palestinians in Gaza right now, who are starving to death, but they will have failed Palestinians more generally, and they will have failed the very purpose of why the UN was set up, and the very purpose of the world order that was set up post the Second World War. This is a moment that they need to act, and all eyes will be watching.
Yasmin, for your time, I thank you.
Thank you.
All right, there you have it. That was Yasmin Ahmed, UK Director at Human Rights Watch, sharing key insights on the urgent need for meaningful international action ahead of the UN conference on Palestine that is coming later this month. That conversation brings us to exactly 21:24 Central African Time.
Stella Longwe pamalonje.
Palitusokoma pano pamalonje kumvera nyimbo za mu Africa kusangalala kupeza moyo akuti kumva moyo kuti kuyenda bwino pano pamalonje ndiyetu apa tili ndikatswiri oyimba ameneyu ndikatswiri wa dziko la Malawi amene akukhala mdziko la South Africa ndipo amayimba amene akuti ndi Big Nick Malawi. Yatusani kuti kodi moyo wanu woyimba ukuyenda bwanji mu Johannesburg?
Moyo woyimba ukuyenda bwinobwino kwambiri chiliyonse chikutheka ndithu bwinobwino.
Ayi aziwoneka chiliyonse chikutheka mofa magrasi anu apa mwaka akuti kumenya yonse aziwoneka zoti azikutheka ndithu mu Johannesburg.
Malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe. The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa. The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
Vue d'Afrique avec Joël Mouteba. Cette peur d'un point de non-retour nucléaire suffit-elle selon vous à légitimer une telle offensive, Monsieur Talati?
Absolument pas du tout. Cela fait plus de 30 ans que l'Israël crie haut et fort sur les toits, où il veut se faire entendre que l'Iran serait à 1 an pour obtenir l'arme nucléaire. Parfois, l'Iran serait à 6 mois. Parfois, l'Iran serait à 2 semaines pour obtenir son arme nucléaire. Et curieusement, jusqu'à ce jour, il n'y a toujours aucune preuve que l'Iran a obtenu cette arme nucléaire depuis les déclarations d'Israël et de certaines puissances parfois.
Vue d'Afrique, du lundi au vendredi de 15h à 16h, temps universel.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
All right, at a time when the global push for clean energy is accelerating, Managing Director of MENA, Vuslat Bayoglu, says Africa must not blindly adopt timelines set by developed nations whose energy systems are far more advanced and widely accessible. Speaking at the Coal and Energy Transition Day in Johannesburg, South Africa, Vuslat emphasized the need for an energy roadmap that reflects Africa's own realities, including its developmental needs and energy access gaps. He joins us now to unpack what a fair and foreseeable energy transition could look like for the African continent. Vuslat, good evening and welcome to Channel Africa.
Good evening, Innocent. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, thank you so much for making the time. You attended today the Energy and Coal Conference. You have argued earlier that Africa should not follow the same energy transition pace as developed nations. What would a more realistic timeline for Africa look like, in your view, when it comes to the issue that has to do with just energy transition?
I think every country has its own recipe for the energy solution, for the energy needs. If you look at sub-Saharan Africa, for instance, we have DRC, which is very rich in hydropower. The Inga River has got potential more than 42,000 megawatt. They're only utilizing 1,775 megawatt of that capacity. So DRC's all the power needs can be sorted with a hydro project, large hydro project or projects on Inga River. So when you come to Zambia, Zambia produces a lot of power from coal. They have coal available, and they recently actually extended one of the power stations, and they built another unit, which was one of the few that was financed recently in Africa. If you go to Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe has got coal, and they produce power from coal, and they can actually do more because they got really good quality coal in Zimbabwe. If you go to Mozambique, they've got coal, they've got hydro capacity, they also have gas. So they're quite rich in resources, energy resources. And if you go to Kenya, for instance, they've got geothermal, which is a renewable energy resource, clean energy, and they're rich in that one, in that resource. So they can, the geothermal resource plays an important role in Kenya's energy system. If you go to Nigeria, Nigeria is like, it's a massive population. The biggest population in Africa. They only have 14,000 megawatt installed power. They've got massive gas and oil resources, but they have very little energy production capacity. If you come to South Africa, which is the largest capacity in terms of installed power capacity, we've got 70,000 megawatt installed capacity, which some of it is not used at the moment for different reasons, grid access and for other reasons. But we only have like 30,000 megawatt used in South Africa, and that's one of the largest in the African continent. So every country has its own solution for their energy needs. Like, to add again, like Botswana, for instance, they have coal and they are burning coal and they're making coal power from coal. Namibia doesn't have coal. They are using diesel to generate power. So we cannot have one recipe for all countries, and that's actually the biggest, I think, challenge in the world. Like, because International Energy Agency is trying to kind of like guide all the countries and say, okay, look, everybody should go from fossil fuel power capacity to renewable energy power capacity with battery storage. I think it's a good narrative, but it's not realistic at all, and we saw that it didn't work. So for Africa, to answer your question, every country is going to have their own solution for their power needs, and every country is going to use every form of power to generate so that they can electrify everywhere. They can create urban areas so that the countries in the continent develop faster.
Yeah, indeed, Vuslat. You and I can agree that it's not realistic, but it's backed by a lot of money. But what are the risks of rushing the transition away from coal in countries that are still dependent heavily on for job and energy?
Look, South Africa is the most obvious example for that, and it is very dangerous to do that because our load shedding history started in 2008, and since then we had some serious periods where we had really stage 6, stage 7 kind of load shedding times. And at some point, the previous CEO of Eskom was telling the nation that there might be a blackout. And the ironic part is, the minute he left, the new guys came in, and then a month later there was no load shedding. So it's actually very interesting thing to kind of to think about, because they were also talking about sabotaging the power stations at that time. Now, people started thinking, okay, was actually the management sabotaging the power stations? Because they were literally not using the capacity. So that situation caused massive havoc in South Africa because people couldn't have power at home in the mornings. When they go home after work, they didn't have power, so they couldn't bath, they couldn't have coffee, they couldn't wash. I mean, it was a chaos. And we realized that we can't really do anything, we can't really have anything like this again. So I think that's the kind of practically experienced case. We all experienced that people suffered because we didn't have power, and we don't want to go back to that period. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, obviously it has got a massive impact on the economy. The restaurants in the central areas in Johannesburg, in Durban, in Cape Town, they couldn't run properly because they didn't have power, and people's jobs were affected. It was actually really bad for the economy of the country. Hence, if we make a decision where we change the source of energy let's say, from coal to renewable energy, and if it doesn't work, which is the case in Western Europe, in Portugal, in Spain, in Holland, and in Germany, they had their load shedding challenges as well, like South Africa had, and it was purely because of rushing from base load capacity to intermittent capacity, which is wind and solar mainly. So I think we should learn from these countries' lessons, and we should not rush into something that's not tested, because currently what is tested did not work. I mean, if you just look at Germany, such a manufacturing giant, they couldn't survive without Russian gas, because the whole system was designed to have renewables plus Russian gas. And without Russian gas, they were in trouble, and then they ended up paying ridiculously high prices for the gas, and the economy suffered because of that. So, we can't have the similar situation in South Africa, because we don't have budget for these kind of things. So Germany is a developed nation. South Africa is a developing nation, and we've got different challenges. We've got massive gap between rich and poor in this country, and we also have a serious amount of unemployed people, especially among youth. So our challenges and Germany's, Denmark's, Spain's challenges are different. So they can't give me the same recipe for different sicknesses.
Indeed, our challenges.
Hence, I'm saying we can't rush into something that's not going to work for South Africa or for any country that's going to go from fossil fuel power to renewable energy.
Yeah, indeed, our challenges are different. You're quite correct. In fact, a research by the Cahora Bassa in Mozambique shows that South Africa, the region is short with around 10,000 megawatts of electricity, and we do know now that they are partnering with the World Bank to resuscitate Cahora Bassa. But in your view, how do you balance then the environmental concerns with Africa's pressing needs for industrialization, for an energy access?
So look, everything that we do, let's say construction or an infrastructure investment or power capacity that's built, has got a carbon footprint. So that's a reality. And everything that we do is actually governed by the regulations of the state, wherever we are living. Like in the case of South Africa, for instance, to build a power station, you need to get an environmental impact assessment approved by the Department of Environmental Affairs. And if you're using water, the Department of Water Affairs needs to give you a water use license. So it's not like, when you want to do something, you just go and do it. It doesn't work like that. Like you can't go and build something on a wetland. They won't allow you to do that, because technically it's wrong and environmentally it's wrong. So there are systems in place to deal with the environmental concerns, environmental challenges. I think the biggest challenge here is the carbon emissions. So there are carbon emissions from gas, coal, and mainly these two, and diesel, obviously, these three sources of energy. And countries like China and India are dealing with these challenges, or the carbon emissions. They are trying to minimize it with the new technologies that's used to burn. When you're burning these energy resources, then you create some mechanism in the chimney so that you capture the bad gases, your SOxes or NOxes, all those gases can be captured. So there are ways and means of dealing with the air pollution that's coming out of fossil fuels power stations. If we are really serious about talking a balanced approach. Okay, but if you're having a cult mentality, you're saying, no, don't talk about coal. We are not going to touch coal or diesel or gas. We are just going to do what is right, and that's wind and solar. Then I tell those people, good luck. Go and show the world how you're going to power a nation an industrial nation with solar panels and windmills.
Yeah, and in the afternoon, you and I spoke about some of the pathways for clean coal technologies. Do you believe that the continent has the capabilities to basically put together those technologies, and what should international partners play in supporting Africa's unique transition, particularly in in financing and technological transfer?
Look, definitely, like I earlier said, in Zambia, for instance, they recently financed a new coal-fired power station, and they built it. It's called Mamba Power Station. It's next to Mamba Colliery, okay? And I think investors in the world, in different parts of the world, be it China, be it Europe, be it United States, they're all open to different ideas. And I think they know very well that there's a massive potential in Africa. And I know, like I follow what's happening, for instance, for the hydropower capacity that can be built on Inga. Okay, if they can sort out, the DRC government can solve their own challenges, that capacity can be unlocked. And imagine the copper that they're producing in DRC and smelting in DRC will be like using completely clean energy. So it's not only coal or gas-fired power capacity, but also renewable energy capacity is actually offering a lot of opportunities for the financial institutions, for the investors, for the entrepreneurs in different parts of the world. I think the biggest challenge in Africa is regulating these things, because I think if they have the right regulations, all these countries will attract many investors, and they will solve their power challenges at very, very competitive prices. I know, like a lot of pension funds are interested in these kind of investments because they are long term and they're guaranteed by the governments. But most of the African countries are having issues with their internal policy making, internal regulations, and they eventually end up like not allowing the private investors to come into their country and build capacity for different types of power. So I think there are hungry investors waiting to build power capacity in different parts of Africa.
Yeah, speaking about hungry investors, just before I let you go, Vuslat, what policy shifts or investment are most urgent to ensure Africa isn't left behind in the global transition?
You know, maybe, Innocent, what I'm going to say is going to be a bit philosophical, but I can justify what I'm going to say now, and I hope it's not going to be controversial. But the biggest challenge that I see I visited many African countries, and I looked at different opportunities in different countries, be it East Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, or North Africa. When an investor comes and tries to make a deal with the government, any government, okay, the eventually what happens is like, are these guys having some colonial mindset? Are they going to do the similar things that happened in the past? I think that mindset stops certain people moving forward. That's one important challenge. We have to accept it. This is my perception. The second one is these countries, there are some countries which are actually struggling because of the corruption. So when an investor approaches, let's say, building a geothermal capacity or hydro capacity, then they end up like with the hands of some government officials, and they end up like doing funny things, and that actually deters the investors to go and invest in that country, because nobody wants to start a relationship like that, and that will end up like serving that country. I think these two things are critical, and if the African countries' governments are confident enough and they say, okay, we will regulate and we will partner with the private sector, we'll be part of it, we'll make money out of power generation, and then we will power the nation at a cheap power, then they can be very successful. But the mindset, unfortunately, is not there, because I don't believe that states should be producing power. I think private sector should be producing power, and again, governments can be involved in these private sector initiatives, but government needs to regulate. So in other words, if investors are trying to make a ridiculous profit, then that should be stopped. So there must be tariffs which power companies can supply to the power to the households or businesses. It should be capped, and that's what government needs to play a role. Because let's say if somebody is producing power from hydro at 1 cent, one US cent a kilowatt hour, and then they're trying to sell it at 10 cents, that's a problem. If he's producing at 1 cent and selling it at 1.5 cents, which is 50% margin, it's more than enough for any private sector company, then that's good. But governments are not playing that role in many countries, hence they end up like not being able to solve their problem. Just to give you an example, for instance, Gabon is saying that by 2030, all the manganese that's produced in Gabon should be converted into ferromanganese, beneficiated. Okay, how do you do that? Where is the power going to come from?
Yeah.
What is the installed capacity of Gabon? And how much megawatt do you need to put up so that you can make 8 million tons of manganese and convert that to 4 million tons of ferromanganese? So when you say that it's a good thing, like people say, oh, yeah, well, our president is doing the right thing, he's pushing the investors to invest in Gabon. But the reality is, it is not possible, because we are in 2025. In 5 years' time, how would you build all these power stations, and how are you going to get the resource? Are you going to burn gas? Are you going to burn coal? Are you going to burn diesel? Whatever you're going to burn, you need to decide about that, and then you need to invest in this power generation capacity. So the challenges are planning, and then again, not being confident about regulating the private sector and ending up like, okay, we rather don't get it. In the case of DRC, massive capacity, you go to Kinshasa, you smell the diesel. Why? Because they're using diesel generators in a country where there is the most generous river capacity that could be turned into hydropower is not used, and it's like it can compete with what Brazil has, but it's not used properly. So I think the biggest challenge is governments should be in a position to regulate, and they need to invest. They need to invite investors to deal with the power challenges. And again, every country has different recipe. We cannot apply one recipe to all the countries in Africa.
All right, Vuslat, for your time, I thank you.
Thank you very much.
There you have it, Managing Director of MENA, Vuslat Bayoglu, talking to us there about the issues of energy and coal in the continent. That conversation brings us to exactly 21:48 Central African Time. This is Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Nelson Mandela taught us that courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it.
We should all bear in mind that the greatest glory of living lies not in never falling, but in rising every time you fall.
This Mandela Month, Channel Africa salutes everyday heroes. On Channel Africa, the African perspective. Catch us on Satellite Channel PAS 10. The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
SABC Sports brings you Chasing the Sun, the powerful 5-part documentary series about the Springboks, telling the rousing tale of their path to redemption and ultimate World Cup glory in 2019. Starting 13 July at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2, tune in every Sunday for the heights and headache and the heroics that made rugby history. Stream each chapter on SABC Plus anytime, anywhere. No subscription needed. Don't miss Chasing the Sun this Sunday at 7:30 p.m. on SABC2. Be there when history shines.
The pulse of the continent in 60 minutes. Stay informed and inspired with Africa World Hour on Channel Africa.
Now, the Gambia Member of Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament, Saubu Touré, says the diaspora has a huge role to play in the justice for Africans and people of the African descent. He was speaking during the debate on the African Union AU theme, Justice for African and People of African Descent through Repatriation, and at the 5th ordinary sitting of the 6th Parliament of the Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa. He was speaking to our reporter, Ndandla Mahlangu.
Like I said, it's a very important agenda, also very unique. This reparation issue is so important that we must take it up and must take it up seriously as well. And my emphasis was that we must also use the diaspora to be able to strategize with them, to be able to get the reparations that we need to have. Because the diaspora are people who are very knowledgeable when it comes to the injustices that have been committed by the West against Africa. And therefore, since they live among them, they work with them, they know everything about them inside out, I believe that if we work with the diaspora, our strategy will be correct. And I was narrating the history of independence struggle, where, the Dubois, Sylvester Williams, Marcus Garvey, all these people, involve Africans in the beginning. The diaspora was very much involved to be able to strategize as to how to fight for our independence from the colonials. And therefore, when we reach to this stage also, we need to use the diaspora very well to be able to, fight for these reparations. And reparations are important. That is restitution. There is also financial reparation. But there is also what they call, they also call it satisfaction. That some people are not really looking for money out of it. They are not looking for anything, but they want satisfaction. They want the colonialists and those who have been engaged in slavery, slave abductions and all this to come to us and say, forgive us for what we have done for you, to you. It's cruel, it's inhuman, and we want you to forgive us for that. I think that will be satisfactory to some. There are others who are in the diaspora who will never be satisfied until they come back to Africa and settle in Africa. And that responsibility also lies on the African leaders right now. We must pin down our leaders to ensure that when those people come and say we want to come back to Africa, we want to come back to the Renaissance, we need to be able to give them space in Africa, land where they should settle, so that they are satisfied that, all that has been done to them, whether it's done to them, let's not forget that it's not only done by those who have come, it's also done by, some of the people that we live with. Our own people were part of it. They will go and adopt these Africans of their own children, and then give it to the white man to take. So, we need to really help them to settle back, so that they'll be satisfied. I think if we do those type of things, we'll be able to bring back the dignity that we have lost. We'll be able to also satisfy our people to the best of our ability, because we cannot overcome everything, but at least we need to be able to solve certain things.
You also raised the issue of child beggars, particularly in the Gambia. What are some of your concerns?
Yes, my major concern with child beggars is that it's not just children getting up and going to beg. It's not usually like that. There are a few who are poor. You will say a child is poor, the parents are poor, and then, the child goes to the street to beg. That is happening in many countries. But in my part of Africa, in West Africa, like I said, in Senegal, in Mali, in Cote d'Ivoire, in Gambia, in Guinea-Bissau and Guinea-Conakry, the child begging there, the children on the move there, generally, are people who belong to, a traditional school that we call Karanta, or we call it also Daral in Wolof. So these traditional schools were very cherished before. They provide moral education, they provide Quranic education to the children. And the parents willingly take their children to these schools. But the schools are not equipped enough financially, materially, to be able to take care of these children, in the best they could. So therefore, they would utilize these children to take them away from that environment to another environment where the children will go and beg, and we call them almudus. And all these countries that I'm mentioning know about this. And then they would move. Now, instead of moving within a country because of policy, different countries are trying to create different policies. Now these teachers, Quranic teachers, or these traditional teachers will move the children from the Gambia and take them to Senegal. And those in Senegal will also move them and bring them to Gambia. Those in Guinea will bring them and bring them to Gambia. And Gambia, will also take. So we are all affected. So that's why I was saying it requires a concerted effort, but it also requires some study by this committee so that they will study it, know exactly what I am saying, so that, when we come together, they'll be able to put these countries together so that we talk about it and we come up with a policy that will be universal to all these countries, so that no teacher, traditional teacher will move children across the country to another country because the same country had adopted. Like I was saying, Senegal had adopted some policy to stop them. But when they did that, the Quranic teachers in Senegal now move all the children and bring them to Gambia for begging. So it cannot stop until there is that understanding between the countries.
There you have it. That was the Gambian member of Pan-African Parliament, Saubu Toure, speaking to Nhlanhla Mahlangu on the sideline of the Pan-African Parliament in Johannesburg, South Africa. All right, as organizations prepare for the upcoming Liberation Movement Summit taking place in South Africa this weekend, many citizens of the region are hoping that the leaders of these organizations will engage in honest, frank and robust discussions on challenges facing their respective countries. The summit will be convened under the theme of defending the liberation gains, advancing integrated socio-economic development, as well as strengthening solidarity for a better Africa. The ANC will be hosting the leaders of Frelimo, SWAPO, ZANU-PF and the MPLA, who are expected to attend the summit on Sunday. Bonolo Maribe has more.
It will be a moment of reflections as the liberation movements have come under fire to deliver on some promises. Many have suffered a reduced electoral support, while others have lost elections. This weekend will be crucial for the leaders of these organizations as they will engage with each other. Dr. Charles Mupita from the SWAPO Party School addressed these concerns back in the cusp of the Namibian elections last year.
There is this illusion that liberation movements in Southern Africa are losing power. The liberation movements will have to give way to some other, parties. So that makes it a little bit interesting in the sense that in our understanding, there is no liberation movement as yet that has lost elections fully in Southern Africa.
Only a frank discussion can help, a sentiment that many have echoed.
This is something that we've been talking about, maybe in conferences, in schools, about unity in Africa. There's power in unity, so I would like them to talk about how we can cooperate, Africans coming together.
They should be discussing in the summit is firstly making sure that they do what is required for the people in their country, to ensure that everything is governed accordingly, so that we don't have issues of having to fight amongst each other. Therefore, that our cooperation is more beneficial to each country so that we build Africa as a whole.
I think we should discuss foreigners who cross borders to African countries without legal documentation and the fact that they're involved in corruption and drug dealings and crime as well.
President of the ANC, Cyril Ramaphosa, will deliver the opening address. Other countries that have supported the liberation organizations in Southern Africa will also attend as observers. Bonolo Maribe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
All right, there you have it. That's my lot on this installment of Africa World Hour on Channel Africa, the African's Perspective. Of course, if you've missed anything, you can follow us on X. We're at Channel Africa 1, on Facebook, Channel Africa, on Instagram at Channel Africa 1, on TikTok at Channel Africa 1, and of course on YouTube at Channel Africa 1. From myself, Innocent Semosa, on behalf of the team behind the scenes, it's goodbye and God bless.
Hotlines.